Khabib Nurmagomedov against Tony Ferguson, a saga in which became super famous for all the wrong reasons. A fight that was booked, cancelled, and rebooked 5 times, but ultimately would never happen. And of course, the most famous moment from this whole saga became Tony Ferguson tripping on a wire backstage and completely ripping his knee to shreds. So, today I present to you a story in which I want to call the Tony Ferguson before Tony Ferguson. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Fight Scene YouTube channel, and in today's story we are going to be talking about Kevin Randleman and a very unfortunate backstage accident. So Kevin Randleman was making waves on the Brazilian regional scene, which led him to getting his chance to fight in the UFC in the March of 1999, set to make his debut against 37-year-old Maurice Smith. Now, I'm not too clued up on the rules back in those days. They had Grand Prix, they had no rounds, whatever. It was very strange. But basically, I watched this fight back, and these guys fought for 12 minutes straight, and then had a minute break, and then a 3-minute round. So ultimately, they fought for 15 minutes, but in a very strange way. Anyways, Randleman dominated in a superb showing of heavyweight athleticism, something we don't often see today. However, he would then lose his following fight to Bas Rutten in a controversial decision, which ultimately led to his title shot in the November of 1999. So clearly they wanted to rectify the controversial loss and they gave him the title shot. Makes sense. So he ended up defeating Pete Williams by unanimous decision to win the belt. And now here's where we get to the good part of the story. So, set to make his first defense against Pedro Rizzo in March of 2000, Kevin Randleman became the first fighter to knock himself out prior to the bout. It was reported that he slipped on a pipe backstage, knocked himself out, and cracked his skull, obviously cancelling the fight. Now, I would say that's a little bit crazier than the Tony thing, because Tony tripped over a wire and blew out his knee. Whereas Kevin Randleman slipped on a pipe, fell backwards, hit his head, knocked himself out, and cracked his skull. It's really hard to say that this was a funny moment, because knocking yourself out and cracking your skull isn't exactly funny, but looking back on it, it's just crazy. It's just very weird. Anyways, the fight would eventually be rescheduled and Randleman would successfully defend his belt. He would then go on to have a long career of ups and downs in many different organizations. But of course, he'll always be remembered for that insane physique he had. Sadly, he passed in February of 2016, but we will always remember him for his dominance in the octagon, his unreal physique, and a wacky moment that would foreshadow a similar fate for the legend Tony Alcacui Ferguson. Now, I know that's just a short one, but thank you so much for listening and watching. Thought I'd just hit you with a random, wacky, funny moment from the UFC back in the day that you might not have heard of. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll check you in the next one.